Look, I'm not saying Katy Perry even lived a nun, but you gotta hear this story. This is Katy Perry, the pop star. You know Katy Perry. And one day in 2014, Katy decides to take some of that pop star money and buy herself a big-ass mansion in Los Angeles. So, she looks around and she finds one for sale. This monstrosity. Now, Katy apparently really wants this house. Like, she'll do anything for it. Maybe even gonna live someone. I'm not saying she gonna live someone, but just listen to this story. So, here's the thing about this house. It is huge, 30,000 square feet. It's even got a pool shaped like a freaking fish. In fact, this house is so big that it's actually not a house at all. Traditionally, it's been a convent where a bunch of elderly nuns live. These nuns belong to the Sisters of the Immaculate Heart of Mary, a group that's been around since the 1800s. And we'll get back to these nuns. But first, we got to talk about Catholic priests, specifically ones who did boys. You know what I'm talking about? I mean, abuse in the Catholic Church as a whole was rampant for decades, particularly in the Archdiocese of Los Angeles. And an archdiocese is sort of like a collection of churches. So, this collection of churches in Los Angeles had some pretty serious abuse accusations thrown at them in the early 90s and 2000s. We're talking about over 500 victims coming forward with allegations against more than 200 priests and church employees. Cardinal Roger Mahony was in charge of the LA Archdiocese during most of this time, from 1985 until 2011. And under his watch, the church was accused of knowingly shuffling predator priests around to different parishes instead of removing them or reporting them to authorities. They were basically playing musical chairs with these monsters, giving them fresh hunting grounds every few years. One of the most notorious cases involved Father Michael Baker, who admitted to Mahony in 1986 that he had molested young boys. Alerting police, Mahony sent Baker to a treatment center and then reassigned him to various parishes, where he continued to abuse children for another 14 years. Baker would eventually be convicted of child molestation in 2007 and sentenced to 10 years in prison, but not before he'd molested at least 23 boys that we know of. And then there was Father Michael Wimp, who worked as a chaplain at Cedars-Sinai Medical Center after being accused of abuse. The Archdiocese knew about his past, but didn't tell the hospital. He was later convicted of molesting another boy at the hospital. This pattern repeated itself dozens and dozens of times across the Archdiocese. So, in 2007, after years of legal battles and stonewalling, the LA Archdiocese finally agrees to settle with the victims of the abuse and pay them a whopping $660 million. At the time, it was the largest settlement by any Catholic diocese in the country. And this wasn't even their first settlement. They'd already paid out about $114 million in previous settlements. We're talking about a staggering $774 million total. To put that in perspective, that's enough money to run a small country, or to buy about 200 mansions in Lane, or to pay for 4 Katy Perry world tours. That's a lot of cash. And where's a church going to get that kind of money? I mean, they pass around the collection plate on Sundays, but that's not going to cover $750 million unless Jesus is dropping $100 bills in there. So the Archdiocese, they decide to make some money by selling property they own. They sold their chancery building, they mortgaged their cathedral, they liquidated investments, and they started looking at other real estate they could unload. And that property included the convent, the one with the fish-shaped pool. However, there's a problem. Those elderly nuns I mentioned, they live there. And now, these nuns, we'll just call them the Sisters of the Immaculate Heart of Mary. There's only 5 of them still alive, but they've been living there for decades. The convent, officially called the Waverly Drive property, sits on 8 acres in the Los Feliz neighborhood of Los Angeles. It was built in 1927 for some wealthy businessman, and it's this sprawling Mediterranean-style villa with spectacular views of the San Gabriel Mountains and the Los Angeles skyline. The nuns bought it back in 1971, paying about $600,000, which was a fortune back then. They scraped together every penny they had saved from their teaching salaries, because these nuns weren't just sitting around praying all day, they were working as teachers and administrators in Catholic schools across LA. They pulled all of their money together and purchased it themselves using every dollar they had saved. The place has 25 bedrooms, a massive chapel with these beautiful stained glass windows, and yes, that fish-shaped swimming pool, though I doubt the nuns are doing much synchronized swimming in their habits. It's the kind of place that makes you say, wow, being a bride of Christ comes with some nice perks. But in 2011, the Archdiocese kicks them all out. Just like that. Pack your rosaries, ladies. You're moving to a retirement home. And this kicks off a whole dispute because, see, the nuns feel like they own the property because they bought it with their own money. However, for some reason, the Archdiocese feels like the property belongs to them. Now, here's where it gets tricky. The Sisters of the Immaculate Heart of Mary used to be a much bigger order with hundreds of nuns. But back in 1960s, they had this major falling out with the Archdiocese over reforms for Vatican II. Most of the sisters wanted to modernize, wear regular clothes instead of habits, live in regular housing, have more independence in their work. But the Archdiocese, led by the ultra-conservative Cardinal James McIntyre, wasn't happy. This led to a mass exodus in 1970 when about 300 sisters left to form a lay community called the Immaculate Heart Community. Only about 50 sisters remained as the traditional IHM order, and over the years, that number dwindled down to just 5 elderly nuns. And those are nuns in this story. So even though these particular nuns stayed loyal to the church, there's been this tension between the IHM sisters and the LA Archdiocese for decades. It's like that awkward Thanksgiving dinner where everyone's polite, but nobody's forgotten the huge fight from 30 years ago. Because they feel like it belongs to them, the Archdiocese is like, yeah, we're selling it. And they don't even consult the nuns. They just decide. And that is when in 2014, along comes Katy Perry, looking to take some of her pop star money and buy herself a big-ass mansion. Katy Perry, born Catherine Elizabeth Hudson, isn't just any pop star. We're talking about one of the biggest selling artists of all time. She sold over 143 million records worldwide. She's had 9 #1 singles on the Billboard Hot 100. She's been nominated for 13 Grammy Awards. Time magazine named her one of the 100 most influential people in the world. And she's loaded. By 2014, she'd already made hundreds of millions from her music, tours, and endorsement deals. So when Katy wants a new house, she's not browsing Zillow for a cute 2-bedroom starter home. She wants something spectacular. Something that says, I'm Katy freaking Perry. She sees this convent and she loves it. She'll do anything to get it. She wants to turn it into a house. So she offers $14.5 million in cash. Cash. Can you imagine having $14.5 million in cash to drop on house? I can't even afford to put 20% down on a 1-bedroom condo in most parts of LA. And the Archdiocese, they accept like immediately. They don't ask the nuns permission or anything. They just agree, and the deal starts moving forward. Because, $14.5 million will pay for a lot of settlements. To be fair to the Archdiocese, Archbishop Jose Gomez, who took over after Mahoney, did try to explain to the nuns that they needed the money to care for all our retired sisters. But the nuns weren't buying it. They knew that money was going straight to the Sex Abuse Settlement Fund. So of course the nuns are pissed. I mean, they've lived there for decades, and the church is just going to come along and sell it out from under them. And to make it even worse, the nuns look Katy Perry up. I mean, they don't know who she is. They're nuns. They're not exactly keeping up with the Billboard Hot 100. Sister Rita Callanan, who was 77 at the time, and Sister Catherine Rose Halsman, 86, were the 2 most vocal nuns in this fight. These ladies were old school. They took their vows in the 1950s and had been serving the church for over 60 years. They'd taken vows of poverty, chastity, and obedience, but they weren't about to add rollover and play dead to that list. So they Google Katy Perry, and let's just say they're not super impressed with her work because, she has songs like I Kissed a Girl and You're So Gay. Sister Rita later told the press, I found her videos, and if it's all right to say, I wasn't happy with any of it. But specifically, in one interview back in the day, Katy Perry made a joke about selling her soul to the devil. She was on Australian TV in 2010 promoting her album Teenage Dream, and the host asked her about her transition from Christian music to pop. And Katy joked, I sold my soul to the devil. That's a joke. I didn't sell my soul to the devil. But it didn't work out. That's what the nuns heard. And so the nuns, they can't let this slide. I mean, they can't allow their old home to be occupied by someone who sold their soul to the devil, even as a joke. That's just not going to work for them. Meanwhile, the archdiocese, to their credit, they don't want the nuns to be upset. They want all of this to go down smoothly. And so they arrange a meeting at the property between the nuns and Katy Perry. And so one day in 2015, Katy Perry shows up to the place, and she's trying to charm these nuns, insisting that she didn't really literally sell her soul to the devil, that she's actually a rather religious person herself. And in Katy Perry's defense, she did grow up in an extremely Christian household. Like both of her parents, Keith and Mary Hudson, were Pentecostal pastors. They ran the Keith Hudson Ministries, traveling around the country preaching. This was no casual Christianity. This was hardcore, speaking in tongues, laying on hands, demon-casting out Christianity. Growing up, Katy was only allowed to listen to gospel music. She wasn't allowed to read any books besides the Bible. As a teenager, Katy actually started her music career as a Christian artist. Her first album was a Christian gospel record called Katy Hudson, released in 2001 when she was 17. It sold maybe 200 copies before the label went bankrupt. So her roots are in Christian music, even if she later went on to sing about kissing girls and liking it. And so Katy explains this to these nuns. Then she shows them the Jesus tattoo that she has on her wrist. And I'm not sure how impressed nuns generally are with tattoos, but whatever. She showed them. The tattoo says Jesus in a small script on her left wrist. She got it at age 18, before her pop career took off. Then, in order to further convince them of how super Christian she is, she offers to sing Oh Happy Day, a well-known church song. And she's going to sing a cappella. But she has to pull out her phone to look up the lyrics, which has the nuns giving her the side eye. I mean, if you're going to convince nuns you're a good Christian, maybe memorize the lyrics beforehand? Anyway, it's a super awkward meeting, and the nuns aren't impressed, and their minds aren't changed one bit. Sister Rita later told the LA Times she brought her mother, who I think was to impress us, but it didn't. I found Katy Perry and her mother to be lovely ladies, but their lifestyle, that would not have been something we would want. However, the Catholic Church is very powerful, and they're determined to sell this property to Katy. They've already accepted her offer, and they need that money. And unfortunately, there isn't much the nuns can do until at some point the nuns decide too can play at this game. I mean, they feel like they own the property fair and square. And so, they come up with a plan to sell it themselves. And that is when this woman steps in. Her name's Dana Hollister, and Hollister's 54. She's a rich businesswoman. She owns a lot of restaurants and bars in the Silver Lake and Echo Park neighborhoods of LA, trendy spots like Cliff's Edge and the Bright Spot. She's known for buying and renovating historic properties, giving them a quirky, vintage vibe. She comes along and offers to buy the place from the nuns for $15.5 million, which is $1 million more than Katy's offering. And her plan is to keep it open and running by turning it into a boutique hotel, restaurant, and bar. Fancy cocktails where nuns used to pray. But she promises to preserve the convent's historic architecture and even keep the chapel intact. And I guess the nuns are cool with that, because they agree to sell it behind the archdiocese's back. So now you have two competing sales of the same property happening at the same time. The nuns sell to Hollister for $15.5 million, and the archdiocese sells to Katy Perry for $14.5 million. It's like when a scammer sells the Brooklyn Bridge to two different tourists on the same day. But whatever, the nuns, they hand over the deed to Hollister, and she moves in right away. She only pays $100,000 up front, with a promise to pay the remaining $15.4 million later. That's like putting a $100 down payment on a Ferrari and promising to bring the rest later. Seems legit. And Katy Perry, Katy Perry is not going to let this slide. She feels like her purchase of the place was already in motion and legal. So she's like, oh, hell no. And she files a lawsuit, but not against the nuns because that would be terrible PR. Katy Perry sues a bunch of elderly nuns is not a headline anybody wants to see on TMZ. No, rather, she sues Hollister, claiming that her purchase of the place is not legit. And this turns into an all-out legal war. I mean, two wealthy women battling it out in court over this former nun convent. You couldn't make this stuff up. Now, normally when two rich people are fighting over real estate, I just grab some popcorn and enjoy the show. But there's something kind of sad about this whole situation with these elderly nuns caught in the middle. Sister Rita Callanan told the press, "We have given many years to this archdiocese, and we have served them well. For the archdiocese to tell us we cannot sell our own property, that is incorrect, and I am very disappointed with the archdiocese." The whole dispute hinged on a complex question: who actually owns the convent? The nuns claimed ownership through the California Institute of the Sisters of the Immaculate Heart of Mary, a non-profit corporation they had formed. But the archdiocese claimed that this corporation was under their jurisdiction and that the nuns couldn't sell the property without their approval. It gets even more complicated because the Vatican was also involved. Under canon law, that's Catholic Church law, the sisters would need approval from the Holy See to sell the property if it belonged to their religious institute. So now we've got the Pope tangentially involved in Katy Perry's house hunt. This story just keeps getting wilder. And this legal battle goes on for years, and I'm sure it's very stressful for all of them, especially the 80-year-old nuns involved. I mean, they should be enjoying their golden years, not getting deposed by lawyers. While all this legal wrangling is going on, Hollister is actually living in the convent. She's moved in her furniture, she's making plans for her hotel, she's probably measuring for curtains. Meanwhile, Katy Perry is just waiting like, "Can I please get my mansion now?" But in 2017, they finally go to trial. Los Angeles Superior Court Judge Stephanie Bowick presides over the case. And after hearing all the arguments and looking at all the evidence, she rules that the nuns, for some legal reason, do need permission from the Vatican in order to sell the convent, which means Hollister's purchase of the property is invalid, which means Katy can move forward with buying the house from the archdiocese. She won. And to make it worse for Hollister, right after that, a jury finds that she's also guilty of malice and fraud in her attempt to interfere with the sale of this property. The jury decided that Hollister knew the nuns didn't have clear authority to sell, but went ahead with the purchase anyway to block Katy Perry's bid. They found that she acted with oppression, fraud, or malice. So now she's ordered to pay Katy Perry and the church $10 million in damages, $5 million to the archdiocese, and $5 million to Katy Perry herself. And that is a lot of money. In fact, it's so much money that it literally bankrupts Hollister, like she has to go to bankruptcy court. I mean, imagine being so determined to stop Katy Perry from buying a convent that you end up bankrupted by it. That's commitment, or obsession, or maybe just really bad legal advice. And so then one day in 2018, she goes to bankruptcy court and two of the nuns go with her because they're all like friends now. I mean, they've been in this lawsuit together for a long time, and they're there to support their friend, Sister Rita Callanan and Sister Catherine Rose Halsman, who by this point are 80 and 89 years old, respectively. And then on the steps of the courthouse, Sister Catherine Rose Halsman speaks to the news media, and she pleads for Katy Perry to stop. Like stop with all the legal actions against her friend. And to Katy Perry, please stop, Sister Catherine Rose told Fox 11 News. It's not doing anyone any good except hurting a lot of people. And sadly, those words would be this nun's last words because hours later in the courtroom, she collapses and dies from a heart attack. She was 89 years old. Sister Catherine Rose Halsman, who spent 56 years as a nun, died right there in the courtroom. And her friend, Sister Rita Callanan, claims the heart attack was caused by stress directly related to this Katy Perry lawsuit. Sister Catherine Rose served the church with dedication and love for many years, and today we remember her life with gratitude, the Archdiocese said in a statement after her death. But they didn't mention that she died while fighting against them in court. I'm not saying Katy Perry lived a nun. I'm just saying this other nun thinks so. And that's the thing about this whole saga. Everyone thinks they're the good guy. The nuns think they're protecting their home and legacy. The Archdiocese thinks they're doing what's legally right and financially necessary. Katy Perry thinks she's just trying to buy a house she fell in love. And Hollister thinks she's saving a historic property. But intentions aside, the whole thing is just sad. A nun died, a businesswoman went bankrupt, And there's still this beautiful property sitting empty in Los Angeles while everyone fights over it. After Sister Catherine Rose's death, the remaining nun, Sister Rita, didn't give up. Even though she was battling cancer and had moved to a rehabilitation center due to health issues, she kept fighting. At one point, she even sent a personal appeal to Pope Francis, asking him to intervene. "Dear Pope Francis," she wrote, "they are trying to sell our convent to Katy Perry without our approval. Please help us." But the Pope, perhaps wisely, stayed out of it. I mean, he's got the whole Catholic Church to run. He probably doesn't need to get involved in a real estate dispute with a pop star. Meanwhile, Katy Perry was probably wondering if this convent was cursed or something. I mean, all she wanted was a nice mansion, and now there's a dead nun, a bankruptcy, and a whole lot of bad publicity. That's enough to make anyone reconsider their dream home. Anyway, at the end of it all, Katy still needs approval from the Vatican to purchase the property, and they're unable to work out a deal, and so her option to buy the place expires, and everyone just kind of moves on. So, in the end, after all that, no one got the property. The convent remains empty, a monument to a bizarre legal battle that pitted pop star against nun. But wait, there's more. Because in 2019, Sister Rita Callanan, the last surviving IHM nun from this saga, gave an interview to the Daily Beast where she claimed she was broke and being forced out of her retirement villa. She said the Archdiocese had cut off her financial support and that she only had $20,000 left in her bank account. "I really didn't want to fly to Rome," she said in the interview. "But I want to tell the Pope what actually happened, and I want to ask him to nullify everything." She even set up a GoFundMe page to help with her living and legal expenses. The Archdiocese, of course, disputed her claims, saying they were continuing